So, did you get my email?
Yes, I did, thank you.
All right. So, and those numbers check out.
Yeah.
The usage numbers match the dollar numbers.
I'm not gonna be here Monday night because I'm going on vacation. So the permit that I just submitted, I'm so excited.
It's not on the agenda for
Okay,
Monday.
no, I was
I
just making
just
sure.
approved that
Okay, good.
yesterday. It'll be next week.
Okay, good.
Ask John. I thought I.
Oh, I can guarantee you he hasn't called. Probably.
Okay. Mandy. Hey, Mandy. Mr. Peterson. You guys ready? That is on. I'm ready when you are, Mayor.
Let's all rise and have a word of prayer and pledge allegiance to the flag. If we all bow our heads, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day to live in such a great city such as Leesburg, Florida. Thank you for the city council that administrates and governs our city, for our city manager that is our day-to-day operations manager, all the staff that work so hard to make Leesburg such a great city. We pray thank you for our residents, our business owners. We pray, God, for a prosperous year. We thank you, God, for all the visitors that may come to our city, those around the world fighting for the freedom that we all enjoy. Our first responders, our police officers, God, who just, God, do a wonderful job keeping us safe. We ask, God, you would guide our hearts and our thoughts tonight as we go through our budget process to make sure the things we do tonight will be beneficial for all that are affected by what has happened. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Yes, sir.
You ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we will jump right into it. Tonight is special revenues, so we'll have a bit of a discussion on that. Debt service, which is really super easy, kind of pass-through fund. Capital projects fund, that's actually a super easy fund, but in it lies our capital improvement goals for the year ahead. So we'll have probably a little bit of a discussion on that. And then really the bulk of the city, water, sewer, electric, and solid waste enterprise funds tonight. So hopefully if we did the budget right, those are all the biggest expenditures that we do, and we won't talk very much about it because the budget is prepared that well for you. So with that, we'll go over into the special revenues. The first one is we start out with our 3 CRAs. The first one is the Greater Leesburg CRA, also known as the Downtown CRA. In a land area, I'll be a little repetitive too for the new commissioners. The Downtown CRA essentially consists of downtown, so that corridor of 9th Street, north-south from 441, all the way down to the basin here. From that to Canal, from 441 all the way down to the basin. And then we kind of reach out and we grab a little bit of the property that's south of the hospital. And I missed Pine Street. So actually, if we go beyond Canal and we get out about to Lake Street, because we get that corridor of Pine Street that's part of this. So does everybody get that box?
Inside Dixie and Boulevard.
Yeah. Take that diamond box, and that's the Downtown CRA. It's been in existence
97.
15, 18 years. I think we did a 20 years window, and we just re-upped it for the next 20 years. We did that maybe a year ago. So we're in the second life of this guy that goes, and we're in year 1 of another 20 year. So let's start with cash. We've had some cash here. We did have a bit of a big drop off in cash from that 615,000 to 72,000, but that concerned transferring about $500,000 for the capital improvement projects for the master plan. We paid some cash out of there to help the partnership out. We did the design plans for Pine and Market out of that cash. So those 4 things. Did I miss anything? And so we're sitting on about $100,000. So what does this guy do? He's been a little bit steady. He typically brings in about $550,000 a year. These are really the numbers to look at, which are similar. We're showing a $90,000 difference only because we brought over some cash last year to get some projects done, and that's where you're seeing that difference. So less the cash issues, this CRA looks the same. So where are we spending our money? Basically, half of the money that comes in goes out to the CDC pursuant to the decree back from the 90s. And then the same amount we end up spending, and we spend it kind of 3 different ways. We go the debt service. That debt service was the debt that we issued. I think it was $1.3 million to do the Gateway project. And so we're probably in about year 5 of that now, of a 10-year note. And then we put $75,000 back in to replenish the facade sign landscape housing grant. We went through that. Actually, we spent the remaining monies of those really about 2 weeks ago, or two months ago, with the, say, facade sign landscape cycle number 3. So this would fund cycle number 4, and we continue to get calls from different businesses who want to upgrade and that type of thing. I've been encouraging them to watch us once that allocation's approved, and to start applying August, September timeframe, so that if you do approve the budget by October, November, we'll go right back around with the FSL grant applications back to this body and get those approved and get the fiscal year 22 cycle out. And then we put about $95,000 back in the bank.
How many do we help businesses with the $75,000 you estimate?
I want to say maybe Dan's not here. I'm just going to take a little bit of a wag. I think we probably had 5 or 6 different businesses downtown in this past cycle with that money.
Is this the sign grants?
Yeah.
Okay. We call it housing grants, but
It's both. This one is both. And so we kind of put it both so we can fund it both ways. The downtown CRA doesn't fund a lot of housing stuff because there's not a lot of housing stuff there. So most of this money does go towards sign and facades. Businesses, Brick and Barrel, CIPS, Chicago Brewery,
Myron Leggett is
there,
good.
Byron Leggett. There's a good number of businesses on downtown have got. You gave money to Beacon, so we're spreading it. Tropic got some. So we've been spreading it up and down that corridor pretty good. That's the downtown CRA.
Does one of these slides had 75,000 projected cash? That's before the 94,000 we're going to add back this year.
No, that number right there, the 94 is the cash number we should
That we're going to
add.
add, but I'm saying there's a graph, a cash reserves graph that shows 75,000 in October
This one
21.
right there. I think that number is going to be closer to 100.
That's what I was at. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So by the year end it would be like 150.
150 to 200.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's downtown CRA. The next CRA is the Carver Heights Montclair CRA. Carver Heights Montclair CRA, as well as the 441 CRA. Very positive growth there. So here we are on the Montclair CRA. We see they're sitting on about 400,000 in cash, so that's nice. Here's where we spend the money. We kind of divide the Montclair CRA into two areas. Typical miscellaneous kind of stuff, and then running the resource center stuff. So their revenue is actually up about 88 grand for their TIF this year, and here's the general stuff. Generated operating stuff, this 60 grand is housing reimbursement stuff, insurance, so those wraparound services we call, that help people with housing funding and these type of things, and insurance dollars. The next is $96,000 on debt service. That's the debt service. I think we borrowed that from electric fund, which is the payment of the unfunded portion that we funded with debt to build the resource center. The next is other uses. The 176, was that the reserve that we had this money left over? We said, we're recommending that you stick that just in a pot, just for any type of overruns that may happen at the teen center. So maybe you don't use it, maybe you do. And then grants and aids, this is we call it grants and aids up here, but this would be the FSL and housing grant program for any houses or businesses in the Montclair, Carver Heights CRA. So that's part one. Part two.
Before you go to that next slide, how much is left on the debt service for the resource center? You can get it after. You can keep going. You come back.
We borrowed $1 million, and we're into it 3 or 4 years. I'm gonna say my WAG is going to be about $750.
Okay.
But well, as we discussed this, Brandy will get the formal number on that.
So we're going to 100 grand on the facade landscaping, which we've had zero at every other year. Are we getting a lot of demand for that grant program in this CRA?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I think we threw, maybe this is the second cycle of 100 grand.
No.
Is it not?
Well, it wasn't budgeted if it was.
No, I'm talking a couple years ago. It took us a couple years to spend down the 100.
Okay.
And so this would be second cycle of that.
Yeah.
Of the 15?
We did, okay, yeah. So I guess, and I'm okay with it for now, and I brought this up last year, but I'll bring it up again because it gets, the cash reserves are getting bigger and bigger. We're talking about 400, but then we're going to add another 170. We're going to be over, 550 to 600 at the end of next year, which we're not supposed to do in the CRA, is let cash build up. I think we need to start aggressively having meetings and figuring out what we're going to do with that money. Is there a new project that the community would like to see tackled? I just don't like it sitting there, and my opinion is that the teen center is not a appropriate use for that money, because that is a citywide benefit. I think there's some gray area there, but it's supposed to be the benefit's supposed to be narrowly tailored to the district itself. So.
And I would concur. I think, I don't know if you have any project, but I think we need to go out, similar as we did downtown, borrow a few $1 million, acquire some of these blighted properties, try to spur commercial development within the Carver Heights community it was a $10 million bump in tax revenue, in base. So I think that's the CRA's role, is to borrow early as possible, pay it with the debt service, and spur more development in the neighborhood. And I agree with Commissioner Roebuck. I don't think we should cipher money out for the teen center. I think that's a citywide project. I think this should be CRA specific. So I would really like the CRA board staff to bring us projects that the community has identified, or the city has identified, that could help the Carver Heights, Montclair area grow. Specifically commercial development, and if we're going to do housing, good housing within the neighborhood, the CRA. I would like to see us not just go 100,000 every year, but let's go out and do a bank note or whatever we got to do. Interest rates are low. Let's go and borrow the money. We have almost 500,000 plus that we can kind of utilize. I think the growth is strong enough to pay the debt back. So I would really like to see us come back before this budget with some projects that we haven't already identified some. Because I probably can bring some to you, but I'm sure your staff probably has, Al, you probably have some identified projects.
Absolutely.
I kind of knew you would, Al, somewhere in that black book.
I kind of got excited about this is my territory. Hi, I'm Dr. Erica Jasper, and I sit on the CRA board, and I just want to echo the same sentiments that both of you all had, Commissioner Roebuck and Mayor John Christian, about the money sitting in the CRA account. I do have some ideas if we don't have any projects in plan for the funds that are listed. I know there's some problem areas within the Carver Heights, Montclair area that I would love and I have an interest in resolving those issues and building some economic development and also residential. So if we have any plans moving forward, I would love to, I have some ideas for that. So I just want to interject that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Well, you're on the CRA, so I think the CRA can bring something to us on the agenda so we can look at it. If Al, I'm sure Al has some more detailed items.
Yeah, we talk about borrowing money. I'm not against it, but we've got 400,000. I do agree with the comments on the 176. Should go into that fund plus another 100,000. So we right there, we're up to almost 700,000. I'm not sure how ambitious you want to get with the cash and all the money it's generating. Do you really have to borrow, or I don't have a strong opinion on it. I'm putting it out that we're pretty strong.
Yeah, and I was thinking, if you study CRA, that's kind of the makeup of a CRA, is what it's for.
Okay.
Is to kind of borrow first, do projects, and you encourage other development to come, which will increase your tax base, will bring more money to pay your debt off faster, and hopefully we can do it again before the life of the CRA expires. So that's kind of the theme, ideal of a CRA, is to do as much projects as possible, see growth happen, eliminate blight, would encourage you to come out and spend money, and then tax base goes up even more. So instead of saying we're bringing in 500,000, next year we're bringing in 607, pay the debt off faster and kind of do it again.
Yeah, and probably the only this microphone is sensitive. Probably the reason I perked up, I was looking over Al's shoulder, and I think the debt on the Resource Center is almost $1 million.
At the
Am I
Resource
reading
Center?
that right? About 960 on the Resource Center?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question
Okay.
in a second.
And I would say, because I think it is a good point you're bringing up about the debt. and what just historically got the city
Yeah,
in trouble a really long time ago,
If
way
I could-
before.
If I can have the conch back here, let me.
Yeah, go
Let
ahead.
me give you my opinion, and obviously it's your manager's opinion, and you can take it or leave it, but I think it justifies why you see this conservative approach really to all three of your CRAs. So first, let me answer the question that was posed on the debt on the Resource Center. It was issued in 2019. It was a 15-year note from the electric fund, I think at 1.5% interest, something really simple. It's scheduled to retire in 2033. The balance on it is $950,000. The Carver Heights CRA is scheduled to retire in 2045. Okay, so there's the answer to the mayor's question. Budgeting approach and why these CRAs have cash. 8 years ago, the CRAs didn't have cash, and they were extremely slow growing. And not only did they not have cash, the 441 CRA had a humongous $10 million deficit because we did exactly that. We started a CRA, it was in a great balloon year. We thought, man, that thing was gonna generate multi-million, $5-6 million a year. We went out, we borrowed $10 million. The day after we literally signed the note, the economy blew up, boof, and the increment on the CRA, 441 CRA, dropped in the hole. We used gas to finance stuff, we built a bunch of bridges, and so if you go back when you hired me back in 13 and 14, the budget presentation was keep that bullet from sinking the general fund, and we did a bunch of stuff to prop up the 441 CRA using, Jim was a big help, and I think we're probably one of the only CRAs in the state that found that little line that gave us how we talked the county into recalibrating the baseline. So we did that, and now we're seeing growth. So now you guys, this is a good problem that you're yelling at me about, saying we got too much cash in the CRA. That's a reasonable statement, okay? But you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have said this. Let's jump over to this is a good bridge to jump over to the 441 CRA. They got a ton of cash. They're sitting on $1.9 million of unrestricted cash. They've also got $600,000 in reserve cash for a bond covenant. And then there's another $300,000 that might come from fiscal year 22. So remember, our plan on this has been, we can't let this guy affect the general fund, because when the CRA goes upside down and you issue bonds on that, the general taxing power of the city is the one that has to go in and bail it out. So what's that mean in English? The general fund has to raise taxes to pay the debt on a CRA if your note doesn't grow. So we did what we could do. We had a balloon note at that. And so my advice to you guys has been, for the last several years, we got things rescheduled. Keep your powder dry. We're going to hit the first balloon note in a couple years, and we went from like $100,000 payments year 1, year 2, $500,000. Fiscal year 22, this one coming up, marks your first year that you pay full freight on your debt, and that's $900,000. Guess what? Because of the conservative approach we took, we can pay the debt in the 441 CRA because we recalibrated the base year, and based on the last 2, maybe 3 years, it looks like if we stay at just 5% increments of growth, this CRA is going to be able to handle the debt and have cash left over. So my advice to you before we get into the numbers, stay the course. Don't do anything crazy yet. Make sure that this chart that we programmed 3-4 years ago stays working, and then maybe fiscal year 23-24, now you come back and spend that cash because you see the growth, i.e. go back to some of the controversial things we did with the mall. Prop up the mall with the FSL grant. Prop up the mall with the CARES Act, because the mall is a significant number in that ad valorem base that feeds this guy. If the mall goes dark, this number goes down, this number goes down, your ability to pay the note goes down. That's a direct correlation. That's how important the mall is to our financial situation. That's why those subsidies to the mall is really important to us. So all the dark news there and why we were so conservative, let's be happy a second, and here's the good news. So last year, $1.2 million in revenue from the CRA, 44127. This year, up a little bit, almost 1.4 million. Where do we spend it? We've got a little bit of operating. There's the number I was just talking about. Where's my, okay? The debt, that's the debt on the note. $500,000 last year. So that was the last balloon payment. Now you're paying full freight. That $900,000. We've got that number from here until 2036. $1 million a year has got to come out of that fund to retire that debt. Grants and aid, that's redo your facade sign, landscape and housing, so trying to do that. And then after we pay the debt, we throw a little money at the facade sign landscape to continue beautification issues. You've got 336 left. That goes along with our plan. Keep your expenses down, bank the cash to make sure you can cover your debt. So remember, we did this chart. So this was kind of the how we move along chart. This number here kind of shows how and remember, we lopped off a couple of payments, but from here on, this is the end of the balloon. There you go. So basically, after you pay your debt, this plus new revenue minus that, you end up with your balance. So the good thing is this chart is assuming 5% growth, taxable value is this column. What you get minus your this times the increment less this equals what you got left over, then plus your balance. So at the end of 22, we're looking at sitting on $3 million in that fund. So time comes is if we stay about 5% growth, probably next year or 24, we'll be sitting on some other cash here, where maybe at that time we might want to start going and looking at major projects, or maybe even paying down and refinancing that debt. That might be something we want to look at now.
I was going to ask you, what's the interest rate on that debt?
Do you know, it's 2.5. So it's not crazy. And I think we redid that too.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are all, I think, good points. I think the issuance of that CRA, when they borrowed it, was the bigger problem of not how they were managed it, but the fact that you would even borrow money on a negative TIF. So, I mean, they borrowed more money than the CRA was, the payments were more than the CRA was generating at the time they borrowed it, which was just absolutely insane.
But that also kind of blew up too. That was
yeah,
right on
they
the
borrowed right at the
cusp.
peak.
In the boom times?
Yeah, and they borrowed more than it was generating at the peak, which was problematic. They got maybe sold a bill of goods by a financial advisor as well, which made the whole thing even worse. And so I would say, though, if we look at CRA, to the whole point is, with the Carver Heights, is, yeah, absolutely. If we're generating 176 in annual money and we find a good project, we can't borrow where our payments are $176,000 a year. We borrow and payments are $100,000 a year. You know, I might be comfortable with that, because then even if things turn down, we've got a large buffer plus the cash. You know, when I look at it, you could probably borrow $1.5 million and be okay.
So I will say my excuse for being overly conservative is following the lead of the commission and pay as you go. So that's how we've been doing it. I think that the Carver Heights CRA is a little bit of the engine that could, because it's kind of been a steady performer. As long as things stay okay, I think probably the next year or so, we probably want to take a look back at the 44127 CRA and recalibrate that. I don't know if I'm quite ready to do it yet, but it's getting close.
And I think for me, going back to Carver Heights CRA, is the 441 CRA, when we borrowed that money, it was to move utility lines underground. The difference is, against my best wishes, because I thought you should have went out and bought some of those hotels down on 27. If you had those hotels, you could sell them, and then you wouldn't be in such a big issue with debt. So in Carver Heights, if you're buying property, building facilities. If the market crashes, God
got an
forbid,
asset.
2008, and you got a debt, what I would do, you would sell your property, eliminate your debt so you don't come into this issue. Of course, it's hard to do that when you got buried utility lines. You can't sell off anything. So you're stuck with the problem of 441.27. But it doesn't mean you have to go out and borrow $14 million. So if you got a debt service, you're bringing in X amount of dollars, you can still be conservative, but at the same time, you're not doing the $100,000 project. That doesn't move the needle. That doesn't encourage anyone to say, let me go and redevelop this community. And that's what a CRA does. It's supposed to eliminate blight. Well, if I'm spending $100,000 a year, I'm not going to eliminate much blight. We're giving $50,000 housing grant. You're giving $50,000. If you're doing 5 houses a year, in 5 years, you've done 25 houses in a community. I don't think that's going to spur much development. So we're going to really be serious about eliminating blight, as we did in downtown CRA when it borrowed $1+ million to do some brick pavers downtown. So I don't think, we would have to be crazy and borrow a bunch of money, but I think the tenor and tone of a CRA is just to do just that, not, pay as you go. That's like me saying, I'm going to just get my paycheck until I get enough money to buy a house. So I'm going to be homeless until I get 30 years to buy a house. So I think also you have to be kind of conservative, but at the same time, you got to be bold if you're going to really eliminate blight in these communities. And I think we got enough cash that we can put some money aside to borrow enough money to do some projects that we can all be proud of, especially coming down Thomas Road or Beecher Street and these main corridors coming into the community. Thomas Road over behind Walmart, a lot of development is going on. It's probably why the 10 million increase. There's a lot of development going on Thomas Road, and I think we should capitalize on it while the growth is happening within our communities. So I think they're a little different. 441 and Carver Heights is a little different, but I don't think we have to borrow a lot, but I think we should borrow something, get especially when interest rates are low, to do some projects I think can make us all proud. So I don't know if you have a project, Al, you got something on top of your head?
I don't know, there may be a couple of things, but before we wrap this up in September, we'll come back definitely at Carver Heights with some different concepts there.
Okay.
That wraps up the 3 CRAs. So moving into discretionary sales tax. Last year, we came back and cut discretionary sales tax because of the COVID year. This year, we're kind of putting a budget back that represents typical discretionary sales tax dollars of around just a little under 2.3. Where we're recommending is transfer to the general fund for leases, 725, debt service issues, 260, the transfer over to the vehicle fund, $1 million, and transfer to eligible capital projects at 300.
Yeah, you coughed on purpose, or that was?
No, sir, I did not. We might be doing that because of the definition issue, but I wouldn't say that publicly. That's where we're spending our DST dollars. We'll get a little better picture of that when we talk about some CIPs. Gas tax. Gas tax, again, we were worried about reductions for COVID. So we brought those numbers back. We actually ended up with a little over $500,000. We used some fund balance monies to finish off some projects. This year I think that's a real conservative estimate, but where we go here is kind of a little bit of change in priorities there to help the general fund out, using a little more of our gas dollars to fund eligible maintenance projects. Notice I didn't cough there. And then the transfer for asphalt resurfacing. And our history has been qualifying maintenance projects and resurfacing, and we've just moved that percentage around. My suggestion would be is, as tax revenues grow and these type of things, you want to revisit the maintenance part of that concept and shift that back to more resurfacing dollars. My guess is in out years, we can start bumping this number back up, provided the growth numbers and the outcome looks good. That's gas. Any questions on gas?
I'll just have one quick question to go back on the 441 on the grants and aids. I know we went up from 50,000 to 142,000. Is that because we got a lot of demand for that, or
Yeah.
just got extra? We did, okay.
And that just, I answered your question, I don't know if I think the mayor asked, do we got a lot of demand for FSL landscape grants? Yeah, I think so. And that finishes off gas tax. So, so that finishes off special revenues. So now we'll move into, and is building a special revenue or an enterprise? Okay, so I lied. We got one. Building is a special revenue fund. So building is actually going extremely well, very busy, represents where we're back, kind of, it's 2005 all over again. I think back in March, we hit the most permits we've ever issued, both out of the building department as well as in the planning and zoning department. They haven't slowed down since. And so we've built staff and come up with this, again, surplus of cash that needs to get back. And the policy of the commission has been to get this cash back in the form of reduction of permits to help continuing to encourage development. So we put together, we put together this chart. This was if you remember, we cut 25% of rates, and then we went back and I think we cut 50% of rates. And each time we've done that chart, we've said, okay, we've got to leak some of this money back. This is where our reserve requirement's going to be. Let's see what growth does and see how this goes. Now, in out years, if the projection goes, we'll leak down our cash. But when we get out to these years, which I think that's like 25, does that number, is that 24, 20, 24, 20, this is 24, this is 25. So when we get into these out years, then that's the time where we revisit fee, what's going on, what do we need to do to stabilize that out, and then kind of get back on the curve and ride it out. So we agreed with that philosophy. So we went, which column? This is the 22 column here. Yes? Does that say 22? This is the 22 column. No, this has got to be this is the 22 column? Okay, so when we did this, we thought we were going to be way below the $2 million mark come 22, which would be the end of 22. So the end of 21, we're looking at 2 million. So you go back to this chart. So I said 22 because it's fiscal year 22. We thought in 21 we would be below the 2 million. So what does that mean in English? Our projection is still a little high, which is good. So instead of on this trend, we're actually probably more on this kind of trend. So yay. Probably this number is a little high because some of the new positions haven't hit the bank account yet. So as we get into the last quarter of 21, that number's probably going to come down a little bit, not a lot. Maybe we're looking at 1.7 or 1.8 versus 200, maybe not even that. But so, long story short, building is moving along. It's doing well. So where do we spend our money in building? We're bringing in about 1.4 million with a 50% reduction in fees. So we're up $500,000 with a 50% reduction in fees. So that tells you they're cranking out some permits. Where do we spend the money? Most of it's all personnel and operation. The capital's not in there. We did that in out years where we upgraded and the folks in the department with new technologies and online stuff, which IT's still working to get on. Our goal is by October 1 to have all that up and running. That's the high-level view of the building department.
I got a couple questions on that. The operating expenses I see increased significantly. And looking at the itemized budget, just some clarification. The repair and maintenance of building went from 5,000 to 95,000?
Improvement of walls and offices and workspace.
Didn't we just do that a couple years ago? Didn't they go in there and reconfigure everything?
We refigured with some partitions and that kind of stuff. I think a little more needs to be done. That's where we're at.
Okay.
About 2/3
Okay. One other, well, probably two other ones, but the next one, repair and maintenance equipment, went from 11,000 to 102,000?
The software, maintenance on the software for the new programs, the automated billing, permitting, that kind of stuff.
Is that gonna be an annual cost, or is that a one-time that high?
That's going to be annual.
It won't be that high though. The first couple of years it's higher because we've got new system, a lot of new people using it. Once we get it worked out, it'll drop down to about 50,000 a year. But whatever program we would have been using would have been about the same.
Okay. And I think I just have one more question. On the furniture, I mean, it was 35,000 last year, now it's 20,000, so it's $55,000 in furniture in 2 years?
How many new people? I mean,
No,
you-
we actually didn't even buy, I mean, we bought a couple of desks last year, but a lot of that money was simply transferred over because we weren't able to do everything we wanted to do. So we actually dropped it.
Okay.
Any other building want funds? And otherwise, we'll jump to housing?
The building money, I mean, I realize it's restricted. Feel silly asking this, but planning and zoning does not, there's no way to put planning and zoning under building
I
department.
wish you could.
Okay, you know why I asked.
I do. Housing budget basically takes care of the Miss Simmons apartments, and those are basically the costs, in, out, rents, and those kind of things. Kind of just hanging in there.
So it's saying we have 250,000 cash reserves in the housing department. And I know we talked about this with Ms. Paul Simmons because of the residents that are there, they're very low income. And so what we talked about throughout the year is getting people to be able to become homeowners. And the Ms. Paul Simmons income restrictions really does not allow people to move from Ms. Paul Simmons and become a homeowner just because of the income restrictions that are placed on us. My recommendation is that we take our reserve, whether we buy or we build some rental units that we manage for higher income people who may not qualify with Ms. Paul Simmons, but may be ready for home ownership. Out of 250, I'm sure, I know what the price is now to build a nice duplex for a family and transition them from housing to, and Ms. Paul Simmons, when they go, maybe go to this, then go to home ownership. But living in Ms. Paul Simmons on Section 8 is not going to qualify, get a person to become a homeowner. And we're using those funds to rack up 250 plus pay for administrative assistant. And I don't think we're fulfilling, I don't think my housing mission is to get people to be homeowners. I think that we should become more proactive and control our own customers and get them ready. So I don't know how the other commissioners feel about, or we have any plans for the $250,000 that's sitting in the housing assistance that's going to grow because we have Ms. Paul Simmons, people paying rent. What's our housing plan?
I mean, I agree with the mayor that we needed a program because I've talked to Ken about this as well, the idea that we've got people in this apartment complex, but we can't move them out to the next step. Like we've given all this property to Homes in Partnership, we've done some with Habitat, but the people that we're renting to in Ms. Paul Simmons can't qualify for those type of programs because their income's too low. And so like having it, but I don't know if 250 is going to get it done.
We've got a little bit of a pickle between the city and the county. The county knows this, and we're actively working to figure it out. The problem that we're having at Ms. Paul Simmons is we use significant, let me not use adjectives that I'm not 100% accurate with. In building the Ms. Paul Simmons apartment complex, which is 12 units, we use county money, SHIP, other HUD subsidy money. That money came with the caveat that we have to house very low-income people, very low LMI. I don't know what the acronym on that is. The mayor explained that when we built Ms. Paul Simmons, the concept was to have moderately low-income people to bridge the gap so that they could graduate from apartment complex living to housing living. Because we took that county SHIP money, the number of units then, what's the split? It was 12-6 or 6 and 6? It was 6 MLMI and 6 LLMI. So we have had issues keeping that filled because the county's been calling us on the carpet, or the county won't pay their rent money for people that they think might be moderately low to LMI. So that's given us a hard time keeping that complex full. We had a conversation with the county back in January where we redefined that to bring that very low LMI number from 6 down to 3 or maybe even 2. County seemed to approve with it. They ran it up to Jacksonville, which is Washington, D.C., the federal office of HUD. No response back yet. Our belief is that this problem is going to be cleared up, and Ken's been directed, get those apartments leased out to the folks that we want them leased out with, and we'll deal with it later. So in the interim, we've had, typical landlord issues with making repairs and these type of things that's dinking on that reserve. So my suggestion for the commission is, until we get this squared away with what we agree with and what the county agrees with, and we get the 12 units filled up, don't mess with this pot. I think we're close to getting that issue fixed. Ken, do you agree? Did I explain that correctly? Come on.
Ken Thomas. Al probably doesn't know this, but the county has tried to get HUD to agree to the 6-6 split, but it doesn't appear that they're going to be able to work it out. So we still are working with we're still working with the very low and extremely low population. And so it's hard for them to be able to own a home. So that whole complex will be populated with the very low and extremely low residents.
So what kind of time frame before we get a final from HUD or whoever, do you know?
Al and I met with the previous county manager back in October, November of last year, and they haven't given us a thumb up at all.
So Al, I hear what you're saying, but can we come revisit this in 3 months, 2 months? I don't want to just.
Yeah, for the purpose of the budget, I would recommend this is where we're at. And this is an issue that we need to continue to work on with the county.
Okay.
And I suppose that something like that could potentially be part of a CRA project as well. If we wanted to do something, can you do housing projects in a CRA?
Yeah, that's
So-
I think the housing is an issue that's probably part. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that housing is in the Carver Heights Montclair CRA master plan.
So, okay. I mean, and I'm not saying that's the best project because I don't know what projects are out there, but it's something to keep in mind.
Well, I assume that's what they wanted to borrow the money for. I assumed it was residential. Maybe you had other ideas for,
What, Carver Heights?
yeah, Carver Heights.
I think commercial, some beautifications. Dr. Jasper lives over beside the Elks Club, so I'm sure she has some other more aggressive approaches, but I think commercial economic development is high priority of this as well. We have a CRA meeting Monday night, right, Al? Can we
Kind of like what we did for the downtown. So like the downtown gateway and all the downtown improvements were CRA projects. So are you talking about something, not that specifically, but
Yeah.
like that type of a project?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, what about the professional services? What is the 15,000 in professional services for the housing fund?
We'll have to get back to you on that one. I don't have an answer.
When I look at Carver Heights, I do understand and agree, spending money on beautifying it. I guess my mind drifts to, I'd rather probably give, grant money for businesses to clean up their property, improve them, versus, building, these fancy arches and gateways and all that. I'm just not sure that's going to, do it, in my opinion. I think the business owners would appreciate, money to improve their buildings, clean up blight. I mean, I just don't see, fancy arches and gateways resolving, Carver Heights. That's just my opinion. I drive down Thomas Road. I look left and right. I could see throwing money at some of those people and say, improve your building. I think that's what's going to fix it.
Well, probably if you're, okay, Doc, you live there. I live on the other side, Montclair. Is your microphone on?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I live in that neighborhood, so in the combination to the residential and the commercial, that's the number one priority. And then secondly, that will come beautification, that will come as well. So that's the overall goal.
And for the record, I was against the arches and fancy gateways at Canal and Dixie, so it's not just Carver Heights.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Any other questions on the housing? So then we move in the debt service fund, which is essentially shifting monies around to pay for debt. Any questions on that? Which notes are we paying with that? Where are the cameras? In debt service? That's what the operating number is. That's your camera number. Body cams at the police department.
I'll just say I could find better ways to spend that money, but I'll stop right there.
All right, so we'll move into capital projects. Okay, so we start the discussion on ongoing with the CI Capital Improvement Project Fund with our ongoing projects. So all these projects are paid for, ready to go, or almost done. I'm not going to say ready to go. They're ongoing and almost done. Teen Center funded at the 2.96 million number. Market Street Design funded at the 340,000 number. Let me jump down. That's Market. Is Pine Street Design number in there too? This is probably Market and Pine Street number combined. So, and those drafts should be back to you August, I think, was the time frame when they were looking to have initial designs done. We have had a little bit of delay since our first public concepts because of some survey issues. They had to go back out in the field and redo some survey stuff. The City Hall elevator is in there. That's scheduled to be done in October? No. Was that, or before? End of August. Okay, and so when City Hall elevator is done, that may be the time you want to talk about reconvening back at City Hall. So August, kind of in time for the start of the fiscal year, maybe. Venetian Garden Docks, that should be moving forward here pretty soon. We have 1.4 million in there. That's looking like that project's going to be $1 million-ish to complete. That's the project right out front here. Time frame on that is materials should show up I thought it was, wait, wasn't it July?
No.
Did we get it?
Materials will be available August 2nd, but the contractor has other projects going on, so he won't be able to mobilize his team until mid-August.
That's a new number. So when is that? Because it was July done by October. Are we going to miss holidays again?
No.
Materials aren't here till August.
Correct.
And he had 6 weeks for construction.
120 days period of performance.
That makes it Halloween. So you saw an internal discussion. Obviously, I haven't talked to Cliff about this in a month or so. That number that date keeps sliding on me. And right, so last I talked to Cliff, the date was 4th of July, materials showing up, hopefully being done by mid-August. So now it's mid-August, done by Halloween. market situation on that with materials and that and the like. Having said that, still hopefully not, it hasn't affected the budget number, and that, but that number had, we were able to fund that with a lot of various sources and save our cash. So that, we're around $1 million number, so that number should, we should see $400,000 to $200,000 come back to us if and when that thing ever gets done. It should be.
So Al, you're saying that, so that means the general fund, the rest of the grant's gonna do the million, and so that 400,000, we won't have to spend, it comes back to the general fund, when you say get 400,000?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying, okay,
Yes.
okay.
The Venetian sign. This has popped up for a couple of times. We've held on to this discussion because we were trying to blend it into an overall Dixie Canal Gateway. Y'all decided not to prioritize, is a better word for that. So we're still left with what kind of signage we want to put out at Canal for the new Dozier Court. And you've got $117,000 to do that. So this is probably one of the only projects that's still in a little bit of limbo. And then the aquatic facility, $5.4 million. We're hanging in there budget-wise, and time frame. I'm scared that my last checked in with you was Labor Day. You're going to tell me the same, right?
No, they're
Ish.
a little bit nervous, but they're still projected to complete on time.
That's a good answer.
A clip I asked Al today, have you talked to the crew about the entrance off of Child Street? Because it's about this
Yes,
high.
we
and
did.
it floods.
We're getting some flooding there. And again, and so on that's, let me just jump to the next slide. And I'm going to jump down to, oh, that's 2 slides ahead. Okay. Yes is the answer to your question.
Okay.
We're getting some significant flooding there. Long-term, when we do the Pine Street rehabilitation, that design is taking into account some of those historic flooding problems, plus the stuff that's getting exacerbated by the pool project plugging some stuff up.
Okay.
So based on your text today, we went out pretty soon after you got with me, which I think it was around noon. We pumped the water out.
Yeah,
We're
it was gone.
we're
It was
going
gone
to
when I went back
flush and clean the lines, and we've chastised the contractor to do better, to try to keep water on that site. We'll be vigilant. Please, we expressed my concern and apologies to the business owners there.
It's been
Once
like
the
that for
project's
20-something
done,
years, 20-plus years it's been doing it.
once the project is done, it will be better than ever before, and hopefully this is the last of the pain before we've got a corridor there that we're really proud of.
Al, on the sign, so what's the holdup on the sign?
The holdup on the sign has been getting caught up with some of these other projects and whether or not we build something out there. So if you all want to move forward with putting a sign out front, you've got $117,000 to do it.
Al, you don't
If you're
sound
happy,
too excited about it, Al.
if you're happy the way it is.
That's because he wants his big arch.
Okay, I'm not the one to pick up on that. You guys want to put the sign out?
If
go
you're
ahead.
happy, well, the middle ground is do nothing and throw the 117 back in the hopper. I would vote for middle ground.
I would support a digital sign up there.
Yeah,
It could be used for multiple different purposes for whatever activities might be going on down there.
If signage to finish off the project, we'll get it done. And that's one of the discussions that we wanted to get clarification on tonight, so.
It's gonna cost $117,000 or?
That's I think, a digital sign, yeah, I think you're gonna spend that. Hey, and just for example, the Resource Center sign, that was 25 grand, wasn't it? 32. No, ouch.
My church was 12, so I don't know who you
Yeah,
guys use.
if you're gonna put a digital sign out there that has some, if you're gonna put a sign
Al's
out there
putting
that
a digital sign with some brick arches. And
if you're gonna put a sign out there that has some panache, you're gonna spend that.
Might want to bring
We'll start working on the
I'll
sign.
refrain.
I know,
I
I can't
just-
tell
I
if
think we can
Commissioner
find a better-
Burry is laughing or coughing.
I do struggle with $1 million for signage at an intersection. Yes, I do. I hadn't even thought about digital sign. I don't have a strong feeling. I've seen it with, Umatilla has it. I've seen it in other city halls, not city, well, city halls and, community buildings, but, if we need a sign, I'm okay. I just couldn't spend $1 million on a sign. I'm sorry.
But just before you guys throw me under the bus, $1 million wasn't just for a sign. That was a whole corridor improvement, just like the arches that you don't like.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
Get out of the bus, Al, get from under the bus.
Okay, so those are the.
Can I ask a question on aquatic? Can I jump to aquatic center?
Absolutely.
The numbers continue to grow. Obviously, I've always been a supporter of the pool. Did we, with these new numbers, have we bought all the land? Did we
Yes,
rep?
all
This reflects.
it's in there.
Everything, including
It's in there,
Canal Street.
including that little piece that you wanted,
Okay, everything. It's all
with the CDC and the
straight lines.
CAC.
Okay.
What about the ones we're doing eminent domain on?
Yeah, there was the notch and the houses to the north. They're all wrapped up.
Let me go double check the notch.
But the notch
is-
should be in it, but the houses to the north shouldn't be because we don't even know the number, right? If we're just still in the lawsuit.
There was, okay.
But we budgeted
So
for it.
let me run this past Brandy. Okay. We had the CAC issue, that should be in there, that should be solved. That was the one on the corner of Pine and Canal. We had 9 lots of the Magnolia Apartments, or 7 lots of Magnolia Apartments. 5 of them we purchased for $350,000. That should be done. If it's not in that number, we have it hidden somewhere else. So it's paid for. It's paid for from somewhere else. If you want the exact breakdown, I'll find where we robbed it from.
I mean,
And
I
then
support the pool. I just
we
wonder
had-
when it's going to stop, the spending.
We had the notch.
Yeah.
What did we agree on? We 57 on that, or
50,000.
what?
50,000.
It was 50.
Yeah, okay, that's all we're missing. Okay, so the CAC, CDC corner taken care of, that's a check. No money shifted on that. The 5 of the Magnolia Apartments, it was about 350. We got 5 of the 7, 350. Brandy's got to go find where we grabbed that from. It's paid for. The notch we got for 50. We used interest monies that were hanging out that we paid for that. The only expense that is still left, which is the heartbeat of your question, are the 2 that are still in the eminent domain lawsuit. So you probably have an exposure out there for around $150 to $300.
So my question was, is it in this budget number, or is this budget number going to continue to grow?
I stand corrected. No. We're going to have to go find $150 to $300. We've still got some interest money, and you've got dock money.
And Labor Day opening.
And a Labor Day opening, if it doesn't rain this summer. Okay, those are the ongoing. Okay, so now, proposed. Number 1, the easy one here, the road resurfacing, $100,000 from taxes, gas tax, we talked about that earlier. Rails to trail, that started out at 500. I think the Gardenia Trail and another trail got pulled out of that. So the PD&E study on that is 375. Fundable, we're saying a mix of recreation impact fees, and we believe that that's going to be a project that's eligible for the American Recovery Act program. Marina slips, we talked about expanding the marina a couple years ago. We never did that. We shifted money around. We still had 250 left, so we're going back to revisit marina slip expansion and putting another 250. So you're back to that original $500,000 allocation to expand wet slips at the marina. Sleepy Hollow grandstands is another way, again, to promote the success that we had and follow up on the NCAA tournaments and to continue to entice them to come. 400 grand. We have that program with a little bit of impact fees. Again, hopefully we'll get some TDC dollars on that and some DST monies. Pat Thomas Field, as of this afternoon, we got the estimate based on the discussion that we had the other day. That number we believe to do all the rehabbing and give Pat Thomas Field a nice facelift, 400 grand. DSTs and solid waste transfer to cover that. The way that we bridged the gap, that was originally 300. The way we jumped it today from the 300 to the 400 was to cut this library projects that you questioned. I'll come back and revisit that shortly. Then, once the pool is done, we do need to revisit the Dabney pool and shut that down. We're estimating 50 grand to close that pool, and then hopefully open that site up for another type of redevelopment project. The below sources of revenue outlines where we get all those funds from. Then, to revisit the library, we have, you guys seem to question those expenditures for, I think, reasonable reasons. So we shifted that added up to about 100 grand. So we shifted that to Pat Thomas, and we put in to remind you, A, we come revisit that later, B, forget about it, or C, we're pretty sure that the drive-up window and the shade structures were both kind of, even though they're COVID-related, they're concepts that perpetuate spreading you out, safety, COVID-type new living in the new world procedures to keep safe. So we think that those would probably be American Recovery Act eligible because it continues to provide, it's an enhancement of a facility that helps with the prevention of COVID. Unfortunately, that's probably a really good expenditure of those monies. Okay. Before you jump in, let me ask you, before we branch off, do you guys, the next slide is to delve into the unknown, which is to talk or have our first public conversation on the American Recovery Act potential expenditures. Do you guys want to talk about this, or do you want me to throw American Recovery Act in there and confuse you even more?
I have a couple of questions on the capital improvement projects. On the Rails to Trail, you're speaking about the recreational and a grant. If we find out the grant is not going to cover that, is that something you're going to bring back to us to approve the difference in money before you move forward?
The short answer is yes.
Okay. Okay.
You want the long one now?
Well,
I
that's.
probably should have stopped while I was ahead.
Well, that money's going to be spent, I think, pretty quick, so I believe we need to approve it. Are we approving it now? I mean, help
No,
me
you're
out.
approving the allocation now. So there's the long
Okay.
answer. Commissioner Connell asks, are those funds, your question was, are those?
My question is, we got 375,000 total with a combination of impact fees and grants. If we find out the grant money's just not there to fund this, are you gonna come back and ask for the difference in money to move forward, or are you talking about just pulling somewhere else and without coming back to us?
You answered that, you asked that in two ways. I asked, do you want the short answer or the long answer? He said short. I said yes. You asked the long answer. So here's why the answer is yes. Two reasons. If at that level of expenditure, it's going to require a RFP to go out and seek a consultant to design it and put together the PD&E study. So you approve the allocation, the next step is to go out and do the PD&E. In that process, we'll figure out if those allocations will work for the project, the Recovery Act money, and before you sign off on the PD expenditure, it's going to be back before you.
Okay, so at that time, we would know exactly how much money was secured through a grant versus what we're gonna have to pay out of.
At that time, we'll know exactly how much the PD&E study is going to cost, and we'll know how we can fund it.
Okay,
So we're going into this thinking that, 3 studies on trailheads are going to cost About a little over 100 grand, about $125 each.
Two studies.
Two studies, okay. When we come back to you, we'll know how much those are gonna cost, and we'll know how we can pay for it. We think it's gonna cost that, and we think we can use ARP money, and those are reasonable reasons to put it into a budget.
Okay. And one question on Pat Thomas. I mean, I know we spoke about the painting and cleaning up the inside. As far as the additional monies, 'cause I think you said you were looking at about 175,000 on that at the time, plus or minus. I believe if we went with the full gamut and not just paint the outside and not really touch the inside. So with the rest of the money, do you have a list you put together, an ideas of what you were also thinking? Or?
Yeah, let's revisit that conversation. Your direction, we looked into the project. We came back with colors and concepts and what to paint. At that meeting, a couple months ago, it was 50 grand just to paint it up. That project would be put up some paint, slap up a sign, about 50 grand. If we wanted to touch beams and do a little nicer painter job, pressure wash, clean up the rails, get in, do some fixing and checking of structural issues, said that was 175. When we had that discussion, we threw in concession stand painting. Travis, what did we just, what's the list got pretty long.
Ceiling on the press box.
Okay, come up and give the list.
All right, so we added, with Mr. Meyer and Tyler Brandenburg came up and talked, these are the things that they had added, and they've been involved in these discussions. Fortifying the ceiling in the press box, replacing the chain link fence in front of the stadium, and matching the fencing along Dixie, running power to the shed that the GLAC installed this last year near the concession stand, adding exhaust fan or cooling ventilation to the concession stand and bathrooms, fix and replace the LED lights, replace the existing fans, and add, and this is the name of the company, big-ass fans in the grandstand. In the third base bleachers, taking the existing railing that's there out and putting a higher railing and installing steps at each of the handrails. There's no steps on the bleachers right now. And then the painting that we had talked about originally. 400.
Sure, and like I said, I'm all good with the number. I just wondered what we used to come up with that number, on what improvements we kind of calculated in. But yes, I'm absolutely good with it. It needs the improvements.
And we can talk about it more because you're obviously gonna have to bring back an RFP and all this stuff. I'm a little skeptical of the fence just because I know if they're maxing that Dixie fence, my God, that thing is like, I mean, it's like, I don't know, every 10-foot section is like 25 grand or something stupid like that. And so I want to see a number on that fence of how much that's driving the price. I'm all about making the stadium look nice, but an exterior fence, maybe not.
And all I Go ahead. I got my comments. I ain't gonna forget. But I'm on the thing on Pat Thomas. I'm all for the renovations, but I also think this is would be a multi-use facility, and so I would request again that we have a speaker system inside the stadium so that other groups who use the facility would like to have outdoor concerts, that speaker system. So I would be happy to replace the exterior fence with a nice speaker system. So when someone's having an outdoor event outside of baseball, even the baseball, you can hear with clarity the sound of a quality. So that's my only suggestion that I would like to add to the Pat Thomas renovation. So if you can look at those numbers, and if it's eliminating the fence, I'm all for eliminating the exterior fence to put a nice speaker system so that other groups can utilize Pat Thomas Stadium.
We'll get that in there, Mayor. We had that discussion as well.
Thank you, sir.
I was a little confused on the fencing. Are you talking about like a decorative fence that's like outside the current ball field, or?
Yeah, it's like the one that runs along Dixie here with the brick columns and the wrought iron looking stuff. They're talking about putting that over there where the chain link is, and that's where I'm questioning.
Okay.
And on the audio system, don't use whoever designed this.
Mayor and members of the commission, I respectfully ask that you just give me this 1 minute to talk about fencing, which is controversial.
Okay. Yes, sir.
In December of 2013, when you hired me, you drove down Dixie, the street right here, one of our main corridors that represents Leesburg. And on the south side, as you look over to this beautiful lake, there was an ugly chain link fence. And this corridor looked like hell. We invested in that corridor and we put up a beautiful wrought iron fence that represents this corridor, the lakefront city, extremely well. We got so excited about that project that it kicked off phase 1 of Venetian Gardens, 2 of Venetian Gardens, and 3 of Venetian Gardens. And in phase 2, we took out that ugly parking wooden fence along Ski Beach and put in another nice fence. Then I guess I overstretched it and asked you to do the same on Newell Hill. After we spent $750,000 to make the corridor look nice with landscaping and $1.72 million to put the electric underground. Please let me finish,
I was gonna say,
Commissioner.
I messed that up.
You know where I'm going on a 3-2 vote. I didn't get there yet. We invested serious dollars making that look good. And then we stretched it. And we got to Newell Hill, and Commissioner Dennison at the time argued with us about $5,000 date palms. And the commission said, no, let's do it right. And we put the date palms in. And every day I crossed that intersection, and we didn't finish the project. We have chain link fence over the Grand Canyon. We have chain link fence right next to Jack's gas whatever thingy. And if I had my wits about me, I'd know what that thing was called. And Jack's listening and yelling at me. And the intersection has these beautiful trees and landscaping and ugly fencing. We brought a project to you that was grant funded. $150,000 grant, $150,000 cash. We didn't do it. We didn't finish the project. So now before you is a concept of taking that wrought iron fencing and putting it in front of Pat Thomas Field where that ugly chain link fence is. And so doing that would make that look really cool. We won't do it if you don't want.
I think he means that retention area over there.
Dixie and 441, Newell Hill.
Pat Thomas.
Oh, you know when you no, you can't. But when you park like by the health center, and then you walk over, or you park over on the third baseline, you walk around to the front before you go into the stadium. There's a fence that hooks back into the concession stand. That fence they want to do away with and put in the arches that we don't like tonight.
And I have said more than once, I'd like to resurrect Newell Hill. I made a rookie mistake and thought that I should have asked what the project was instead of just coming out swinging. I thought I was perceiving a very small area, so I got the commission all worked up on that, and it got torpedoed. And I've regretted it ever since. But I don't know what the process is to get that back in place. But that
I can bring
once I understood the project and what it really entailed, I was fully supportive, and I'd like to see us get that finished. And I am the one to blame for that. I did get the commission twisted up on that.
Well, we asked you to bring it back when we turned down the fence on somewhere else.
Man, if you asked me to bring
Because
it
we
back,
said,
then-
we had the whole conversation, we said, you know,
I've
instead of spending money
apologized. I've
here, let's
apologized
do it
more
over
than once
there.
for that mistake.
I tell you what, if you ask me to bring it back, I missed it because I was thinking of something else. I will bring you a number.
The question was whether they were going to continue to grant fund it, I think.
I think that one's probably flown the coop, but we'll come back with some ideas on that, okay? We'll revisit that. There may be some areas that we can find some interest money or something. Actually, I would go right to what we have left over after the boardwalk.
One, CIP, is everybody okay with the proposals? Because I got one to add, possibly add. That is on Pine Street with the addition of the pool. We've sent the concept of the commercial parking, off-street parking on Pine Street, the CDC request, because with the new swimming pool cut-through, it's going to eliminate all the on-street parking on Pine Street, and it's going to adversely affect the businesses on Pine Street. CDC, I think Al and Ken submitted a grant to the county for funding, so CDC, I would request that we have the same kind of consideration as the ARP grant and the county grant, just in case. And I made calls to the county commissioner to see if they would assist us, but we haven't heard anything back yet on that.
Didn't we talk about widening that road? I thought that was a
Tell you
solution.
what, if you let me interrupt, that is a great jumping point to talk about ARPA funding, American Recovery Program. Was that American Recovery Program Act, or I don't know, something like that. Okay. With that in mind, we haven't discussed this publicly before, so let me throw out, and mind you, this is initial concepts. As your manager, I'm not necessarily tied to, I think I have 2 projects in here that, man, please do, my favorites. But other than that, and I'll tell you what they are, full disclosure, initial concepts to think about how you spend the American Recovery Act money. We are slated to get $9.9 million, so I'm just going to call it $10 million. That money is scheduled to come in 2 draws of $5 million. We don't know when we're going to get the 2 draws, and we know we're supposed to spend it by 2024-25. Some communities have already received it. They're the more urban, larger communities. We haven't. I don't have any rhyme or reason why or why not. Having said that, Mayor, to get to your comments, here are the projects that I would suggest, and staff suggest, that you look at potential fundings with this money. Market Street Pedestrian Plaza, as that gets done, there. That one's a little bit questionable whether we can use that. Pine Street Pedestrian Plaza, I don't think there will be one question on whether we can spend that money. That one, I think, will absolutely qualify for American Recovery Act reason for 2 reasons. A, it is a transportation network, and B, it serves minority community. Part of the American Recovery Act is there's a carte blanche if the American Recovery Act is designed to reinvest in those affected by COVID the most. Minority community that is going to be a highly qualifiable expense for the American Recovery Act money. So as a matter of fact, the thing's under design. So the concepts of cul-de-sacs, wider streets, brick paving, making sure there's more parking, that number, I think that design number can grow. Those concepts are already in our design. So I think we can knock that project out really super quick. So I am hopeful that come August, when the consultants come back with the design concepts, you guys are going to love it, be able to add to it, and then fund it and get it under construction. Let me move on to some other projects. I already mentioned the shade structures. Number 2, we talked about the sports marketing contract. The sports marketing contract we really think is going to be COVID expenditure because it's going to be able to replace and increase programming that was lost due to COVID. The Rails to Trails, again, another project we talked about earlier this evening as an expenditure for that. We through market, we talked about Pine. So now some other issues. Utility billing delinquencies. As part of COVID, we stopped late bills, we stopped and delayed payments. That caused our uncollectible accounts to spike up to about 1.4 million. Commissioner Peterson, we're back to about 850,000. So before, hopefully, we bring you write-offs of double that you already see. We write off between 350 to 400 a year. My suggestion is that we're going to create a grant that gives that money back. That will be a direct, be able to approve because that's a grant back to people who have been directly affected by COVID will pay your utility bill. Hopefully your write-offs will be zero. I put $1 million in there. That number's going to fluctuate between now and the time that you potentially would approve that project, but that helps us out. Oh, by the way, we kind of use that as one of the ways to balance the electric fund this year. Reuse extensions, we've got a number of reuse issues that helps with getting infrastructure built and those type of things. 1.3, water sewer infrastructure is in the bill as an allowable expense. And then I think there'll probably be some discussion about the Susan Street complex and investments in that area, again, as ideas. So those, I would say, would be initial concepts to start discussion on how you would spend the money.
So, can you talk about Market Street, why you feel comfortable with that being?
I think it goes back to community and transportation network.
Okay. And Susan Street, does that factor in anything trying to get to 27?
I think Susan Street Sports Complex goes back to an injection of community that's been affected the most by COVID, kind of similar to Pine Street concept.
And does it include building the road out to 27?
So I think it can if you want.
I think it'll be, I mean, I don't know what the cost will be if we have easy access, but I think another entryway into Susan Street, especially coming off 27, with the development that's going, I think it'll be a good.
I think the entryway into Susan Street off 27 is a great concept. I think that would be an eligible one.
Yeah, I think it's great to improve Susan Street, but how are you going to spend $3 million there?
I don't know. I like
A road to 27 might cost all of that, depending on if you got to buy property.
I don't want to get bogged down on the utility delinquencies, but have we tightened up now?
Yes.
Okay, so
We're back to the normal delinquencies.
that's my question. Thank you.
How are you, when people get their notices for their bills, so are we right now continuing services for that? Right now, how is that working with the late payments? Just curious.
Yes, the answer is we know who has paid and who hasn't paid your bill, and we know who is delinquent. So what we'll do is we'll take a delinquent late fee that hasn't been paid, we'll put it into a write-off column, and then we'll issue a grant to whatever business or resident that hasn't paid that, pay off the bill, and basically start the checkbook over for them.
Is this going to be for delinquencies that were incurred only during COVID?
Yes.
Okay, so I can't quit paying my power bill now?
No. It'll be COVID specifically related to relieve you of debt generated because of COVID. We'll put in a window that's COVID related.
Was there an approval process, or is this just anybody went delinquent, we just wrote off their bill?
Anyone who you opted to stop delinquent payments, or you opted to stop cutoffs and late payments, which caused bills not to get paid. Then, when you put the switch back on and said pay the bill, you kind of started from scratch. We worked out payment plans which were extremely liberal for folks. So folks may, I'm just pulling this out of the air, John Doe, who lives on Maple Street, may have racked up utility bill delinquencies over the 6-month period of $150 a month for 6 months. Dan, what's the math on that? $875. Then he started working, John started working again, and he started paying his typical $150 bill, but he hasn't touched that $850. So he's got a delinquent, he's got a bad debt to us of $850. We'll pay that for him from the recovery money.
There was no like approval or review. We just did it to everybody.
You're going to review it, because before we do it, we're going to put together a grant program that outlines what it'll be eligible for.
Okay, I mean, I think you know where I'm going with this. I just wonder how much abuse there was in the, yeah, I know there was, COVID hurt a lot of people, but I just worry about how much abuse there was in that system. And by the way, for the audience's sake, I've been critical of our charge-offs over the years. I just don't like writing off money. I think on normal year, we write off about $400,000 a year, and I just have always looked at it, there's $400,000, I could find a lot of ways to spend, and so it's just been one of my hot buttons.
I would like to see a bigger reuse number. I think, the expanding the reuse in the water system is going to be critical to Leesburg's future growth. And I don't know what the needs number is, but my guess is it's closer to $10 million than it is to $1 million.
I would totally agree.
I think, before we fund some programs that are questionable reimbursement wise, I'd rather see it go there, which is clearly included. I think, for instance, the Market Street, that's really a stretch to include in the COVID money. Probably Susan Street as well. Not that I don't want the projects done, but funding them from this particular funding source.
Hey, just 1 second. I just looked at my phone because is anybody in touch with Commissioner Burry?
I'm here, but
Okay.
I can't get on audio.
We hear you.
Can you now? Okay. I tried to chirp in a couple of times and I couldn't get in. So going back to the Susan Street plan, the Recreation Department, you guys are well aware that I spent 20 years on that board, and for several years, there's been a strong desire from those folks that we do not have enough surface playing fields for our football teams and our soccer teams. And the desire from the rec board has been to revamp the Susan Street complex and turn it into like a quadplex for surface playing fields. Soccer, football, and then have you have all your sports happening on surface fields at one location, and then you have the Sleepy Hollow complex with all your softball and baseball amenities in one place. And that's my idea of what I would like to see happen at Susan Street in the future.
I was just going to say, I would agree with that.
Only thing that becomes problematic for me is that once you move all sports, baseball to Sleepy Hollow, it's going to be very difficult without an expansive transportation system to get children who don't have adequate transportation to Sleepy Hollow. We already have a disproportionate number of African-American kids who can't play baseball or can't access it. To move it to Sleepy Hollow, I think, does another disservice. To get more football fields, we have a lot of vacant land. We just talked about the city of Leesburg's own right off the trail that we can just take a couple of bulldozers, clear the land. If we want to create football fields or soccer fields, I think we have enough vacant land in the vicinity of Susan Street to accomplish that without tearing down baseball fields that we just paid a couple $100,000 for a few years ago. We can clear land that is already problematic for the community. When we start talking about blight, we own property that's blighted. We own property that's overgrown right in the Susan Street complex within walking distance. So a few bulldozers from Public Works, I think, will alleviate that problem of hard surface playing area, even beside the racquetball court, this vacant land, I think could be used for practice field as well. So I think if we look at Susan Street and repurpose it and knock down a few trees, spend some money, I think we don't have to eliminate baseball fields that are close to minority neighborhoods to create a Sleepy Hollow complex that people just can't access. I was a kid that lived on McCormick Street to walk to Sleepy Hollow, so I can say from experience, it's going to be very difficult to ride your bicycle from McCormick Street to Sleepy Hollow. So, I just don't agree with that plan, destroying perfectly good fields to create other fields. So that's my 25 cents. Anybody else got any comments? a lot of this $9 million that you proposing to us, Commissioner Roebuck asked for more reuse dollars. So when you find out how much you get, are you going to bring this back to us and final numbers, or are you going to start moving forward with? I know we got 2 plans already in the works.
We will continue to examine what we can use the money on, when we're going to actually see the money. And so we will revisit this, I'm sure, a number of times before we actually start spending. And just as a precursor, my favorite projects on there that I think hey, thanks, David, that I think you should fund, I do think you should go back and the number one priority would be the utility billing delinquencies that affected everybody in the community. Frankly, as Commissioner Peterson says, I think there probably was some abuse in laden in that, but I think that's an expense you need to pick up. While there probably was some abuse, there's a significant amount of organizations and businesses that still have write-offs that you help. You're going to help more people than abuse there. So not only do you help the community, you also help your enterprise funds. So I would fund that first, and then I think the Pine Street project needs to be done. I would prioritize those 2 first, and then recalibrate as you go. That would be my advice to the commission.
Al, on the shade structure that we talked about, the fencing is not included yet, or are we still working on that number?
No, we couldn't. I was going to joke. Should I throw a joke in there? I couldn't decide whether to recommend PVC or cast iron to y'all. So, no, we don't have a number for that yet. Just based on your expressions and your looks, like the general consensus was to push off the window and to push off the shade structure. So we'll push them off. I tried to make it easy for you to shift that to a priority that you guys deemed more important, which was Pat Thomas. And so we won't, my conversation with Lucy today was we won't kill those 2 projects. We'll come back, we'll firm up some numbers and come back.
Well, I mean, what's sad about the library, I feel bad. I thought it was a great idea until somebody brought up the homeless situation, so it is kind of disappointing it's being torpedoed over our homeless problem.
And the thing that, so, the library is very important. It offers great services. We spend almost as much on the library every year as we do on the entire recreation department. So for me, I think there's just a little too much emphasis on the library. Like, it's a good thing, but I would rather have a recreation program than, it's not either or, obviously, but it's just, the number is just, I think it's gotten a little too big over the years.
And I may have been misunderstood. I think I was taking more of a shot at our attacking the homeless situation.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you. Okay. I agree with you. I wanted to confirm, just kind of clarify what I'd said.
On that note, that's not up on that list, homelessness is probably going to be an issue that you'd be able to tackle with some recovery money. That would be another group of citizen who was significantly impacted by COVID. So shelters, facilities, there's probably something you should talk to your elected official partners at the county, because do you know how much COVID or care money the county's getting? With 70?
So we can go find a far corner on an ISBA, buy the property, do a non-contiguous annexation, and build a shelter?
Yeah. Yes, and we can talk about that on August 4th.
Before we leave the Susan Street thing, one more comment. I think it's also important to look at the fact out at Sleepy Hollow, having that complex, you generate a lot of revenue for businesses in Leesburg through sports teams coming to use the facility. The same could be said for having a soccer/football complex with all the fields at one site. You could also see potential gains in your sports tourism that we seem to be gravitating to and doing well. And I just think it's really important to think about it.
Okay. Another source of money there is before we shift into the enterprise funds, we still have the old pay-as-you-go money. $5.9 million is still sitting there to think about. My advice would be, I think, when this number started off, were we at 18 million? Minus the pool, minus the Venetian Center, minus the Rogers Park, minus Teen Center. So we've done good there, and we still haven't really touched general fund money significantly. Now with the injection from the American Recovery Act money, I'm hesitant to go back to use these funds. So that'll be a last place that I go. But like when we talked about the pool project, we got 350,000 if that pops up. And that sounds like a big number, but we've got little pools here, no pun intended, of funds where we can grab stuff to pay. So we got a lot to do, but the positive side there is we've got means to do it, and I think generally we're agreeing on where to go. So that's all a good thing. Okay, so ending up that, jump over to the enterprise funds. The first one we chat about is the electric fund. So the electric fund, it trugs along. Again, we talked a lot about the electric fund in the general fund because of the relationship that of how enterprise funds move the bus is the fuel of the general fund bus, if you will. That's a good one. The enterprise funds are the fuel of the general fund bus. And it's been all over, but with the expansion of the villages, we'll start out right with the cash. We did have some expenditures. The big drop from the 20 to the 15 million was really in large portion to taking those funds apart, or setting them aside rather, for the transformer improvements. So when we did the loan, we grabbed that 4 million, we put it back in the hopper, and so you got that cash number of the general fund sitting up around 20 million, where it's really kind of historically sat. So that's a good thing, and the electric fund continues to be aggressive with capital improvements. We'll talk about that in a second. And we continue to be aggressive with reducing the transfer, and we continue to be aggressive with reducing the rate. So the general fund, or the electric fund, very positive there. So just to highlight, because of growth, because of the aggressive capital plan, we're asking for 2 groundmen to help start training linemen of the future. So that's a +2 of about $96,000. We have an increase in power purchase this year of just a little under 2 million. Our power purchase number this year is just a tick under 39 million. It's 38 and some change. So we've got what's the total number? 175. What's the total all in budget for 22? 160 something, 160 to 180 million, and 39 million of that is that one line. 175 is the total number, and 39 of that is power purchase. So we watched that number pretty close. We had about $131,000 increase, which was scheduled due to smart grid. Smart grid is due to expire, and what I mean by smart grid is that Silver Spring GE contract ends in 4 more fiscal years. So that's going to be on Brad's to-do list to start figuring out how we move forward from GE, or whether we remarry GE in a couple of years. That's a big deal. Remember, that line measures the $70 million that comes into that fund, so it's kind of important. We had a little bit of a decrease of about $1 million, the $500,000 from the general fund that helped us do some stuff. And then we had the $500,000, a little bit. We overestimated our debt payment for that issue that we did to do the system improvements, so that was good. But then we go back and we increase our capital projects a little bit, noting a little bit of cost deferrals in administration and distribution. You saw this chart Tuesday night, which is basically here's how much we transfer and the percentage. So yay, that's a good chart. And then kind of the things to watch to make sure everything is okay with the electric fund, where our rate is, how much we're buying power, and what our cash number is. This goes back to, I didn't update this year, but this number, this was how we come up with the power supply number, is what FMPA projects, what actually we spend versus a revenue minus a percentage of revenue number, and put all that together, and we come up with our best projection. And, with the group, we're still kind of, riding this dotted red line. So we feel good with that number, is what that chart's supposed to show you. On revenues, about the same. We've got a little bit of growth in there. That number is a hard number to get, because even though you see growth, a lot is based on weather and demand, and you could have a lot more usage, but if the clouds are out, demand is low, and then we're doing good. And then you can have the inverse. So even though we're saying growth, and we're only showing $1 million, that's why. Because it's just a lot of complex stuff in there. And then kind of individually, all the different stuff there. St. Lucie is another part of our power mix, the power purchase number. You see where that's at, administrative costs. Jobbing costs is, where we shift out. The distribution cost is, that number is a keep the lights on number. So that's typically personnel and what it costs for us to keep the lights on, and maintenance and change out transformers and do kind of just every run of the day mill stuff. Smart grid is actually busted out of that number. That's count the meter. It costs us about $1.5 million to count how much everybody's using. And then that $17 million is a big number. That's transfer numbers. Let me break that down for you a little bit better, which is in page 288 of your budget books. So that includes what we're operating expenses, but those are really what we call allocated costs. So you have your transfer, but then you have what we call the cost allocations. So each of the enterprise funds acts like a little business, and they have to pay to the general fund the services we provide. So, for example, they pay a share of what Fred does, because Fred does some illegal. They pay a share of the city manager, because the general, that kind of thing. Their big cost is they pay a big share to fleet maintenance fund, because if they're Duke or Seco, they're paying garage to fix their trucks. Instead of them paying Acme Garage, they're paying Cliff in Public Works to fix their trucks. So it's a cost that they would have as they're a standalone utility. And the other big cost they pay is to IT. So if they were a standalone utility, they would have a huge IT cost to run all the computer systems in the SCADA. So when you go in the war room and look where Chris works at his stuff, and he's running out and all the outage light board comes up, so that's a big IT expense. And so then the biggest cost of that is we pay our depreciation, about $4.4 million we pay back to put in a fund, which then goes back to pay all the capital stuff. So of that 17 million, 9.1 is what I described. Then we got $3.3 million in debt service, and then we come down to the transfers. And so between the 9, the 3, and about 4.8 million in transfers, you come up with that $17.3 million number. And then capital projects rounds out about 5.5 million. So $69 million electric fund budget. I think the next slide here is.
Al, can I just ask just a learning question? With the growth in the city, I was wondering how distribution could go down. I'm just trying to learn here, learn the electrical department.
So when capital, they're spending more on capital, which means the guys will be working on the capital side. So it actually creates a reduction on the distribution side. So it's kind of confusing, but that's what's happening with administration and distribution.
So then on capital is a little bit confusing, so we're going to break it down two ways for you. Capital always consists of kind of the same stuff. We're buying meters, we're buying transformers, we're buying capacitors, we're buying wire, we're buying, what is it? Does that say reclosers? Switches and all kinds of fancy stuff you're not supposed to touch, lights, equipment. So we're buying the same types of equipment, but then we break it out kind of what's a repair and an operation cost and what's a capital new extension cost. So I wanted to break down for you kind of where that goes. So of these, what we call capital projects, 38% or about $2.1 million of that is going to new service. So we got to extend out to the village. Actually, the villages probably isn't in that number because we put it somewhere else because of the debt number. But let's say we got to go out and run a line to a new subdivision on Lake Denham, that Radio Road. With that would be that line. And then we got to fix our underground Dixie. That would be this side. So long story short, of the 5.6 million, 38% is fixing stuff, 62%, I said it wrong, about 40% is new stuff, 60% is fixing stuff. And so this next chart then just kind of breaks down a little bit more detailed of what projects we're looking at, but a picture says 1,000 words. And so the yellow and green kind of showed new versus old, where we're doing system expansions and where we're doing system improvements. This lines out in electric lingo, feeder L59. Brad, what's L? I like right here. What's L68? Where's that feeder? Center Street sub. So that's a feeder that comes out of Center Street sub. So they give you these numbers, and then let's put it in a picture. So we're working down here on Sunnyside. We're working out here, Silver Lake. We've got some stuff in here around Center Street, and then we got some stuff out here that serves kind of villages, Fruitland Park, and readies us for Tierra Oaks. That's how I would say $6.6 million is being spent in English.
Couple questions on electric.
I was just going to questions for electric.
Why is the Fruitland Park revenue number going down? We would have thought that's like all built out now.
Let me take a look at that. So that's public authority, city of Fruit. Mm-hmm. So that's the city of Fruitland Park's power bill. Let me take a look into that.
Okay.
It might just be we were conservative. It might be different facilities. They've built some different.
So that is literally just the city. Okay, I thought that was like a
no, they spend,
revenue, like franchise
right,
fees coming back.
They spend between
franchise,
$200,000 and $300,000 a year running the city of Fruitland Park.
Okay.
So just like you saw, like our street light bill is $600,000.
Yeah.
Their city bill, street light, is $200,000.
Okay.
Let me get you a better answer.
Then could you, because we talked about it a lot on Tuesday, the taxes side. So we've got the taxes on the operating expense line, the 1.5 million. What does exactly makes that up that? It's in the other fund.
You're talking, hang on. The 1,624,943 one?
No, 4980, which is 1,517,032.
So he's in distribution. You're in distribution?
In other.
Other. Hold on. Taxes. Gross receipt taxes?
So those are taxes we collect from customers and.
Yes, and we have to remit them over.
Remit them to whom?
State, I believe. State. Jim's nodding, yes, the state.
Okay, I was just curious. So that's not any of the, that doesn't touch any of the stuff we talked about the other night with the tax that we can levy? Okay,
That's a no.
all right. And then on the distribution, we doubled the training budget.
We doubled the training budget to, part of that is with the new linemen and just keeping the wheel moving to ensure we got qualified, good linemen.
Okay. That's all my questions.
If I'm betting, I'm going to have a little left over there, but. Any other questions? Electric? Okay. Because the next thing we had it scheduled tonight was gas, but Jack couldn't make it, so we flip-flopped, and we're going to stick water, sewer, and solid waste in, which all of those funds look pretty good, so we didn't think that those would be difficult discussions for you, and no big surprises in there. So water, again, water's starting to build a little cash. That's a good thing. But again, water and sewer have some big, excuse me. Water and sewer globally have some big issues coming up with growth issues where we, potentially some outstanding impact fees that would come in. But replacement of water and sewer mains needs to be a priority. As we get into this, you'll see where we prioritize some of those improvements. Potential expansion of treatment facilities after we make the improvement to canal. And then I think the next big issue that we're really going to need to start looking at is extension of reuse. Commissioner Roebuck, you spoke to that with American Recovery Act money. So I think it's going to be critical to every penny that we start banking in cash is going to be important, because those are going to be the avenues, hopefully besides debt and impact fees, that we'll look to make some of these global improvements. So water, similar look. There's $1 million there, a little bit different. That's again just a little bit more growth number that's associated there. This is where water money's getting administration, treatment, reuse, distribution, other. This other line is going to break down similar to how we just broke down electric with allocations, and we can bust that number down for you, but allocations, debt, and transfer numbers, that's all weaved in there. I broke it down for you a lot more detailed on electric, and then $2 million in capital. And then the next project we show you where we spend the $2 million in capital. Most of these are all improvement projects to replace main. Yeah, that's an understatement, or maybe an overstatement, but am I right on track? Yeah, so Main on 27, Carver Heights, 27, Stock Subdivision, fixing some storage tanks, some well rehabilitations, similar to what we've done in the past. So continuation where we've identified areas where we need to fix tanks and pumps and pipes. Wastewater looks similar. Again, a little bit of cash is building. Some of this is spoken for in terms of the current plant expansion or improvement, and then expansion to come probably. Besh will tell us here hopefully in the next month or two where we're headed there. And then again, the breakdown of expenses, $500,000 with admin, the treatment at Canal, treatment at Turnpike, laboratory expenses, collection expenses, lift station expenses, and then capital. Other, again, that's a big number, but again, that's the allocations, that's the transfers, that's the debt. We did actually water and sewer, we put a little, they both have reserve. I didn't hit that, what's the water reserve number? 800,000, and the sewer reserve number, that was like $1 million, it was like 9 something. 1.3. And then 1.7 in capital, and again, fixing some sewer mains, and then tanks and pumps and that kind of stuff. We zipped through those. Any questions on wastewater? And then solid waste. Again, solid waste looks good. I think probably the change here is I think we added 2 new drivers. We got that in there before, but solid waste looks similar. Solid waste continues to be a good little engine that's given us those nice injections of capital funds. So each year we get to start looking at the solid waste fund, and you can see that we've really I know we got a little dip here, but it came right back. So even though we've taken little pieces of cash out of solid waste to fund different projects around the community, the bottom line remains there. We've got a great rate that's extremely competitive. We do a good job with collections, and then we've got cash left over to help community improvements. And that was the goal. So that really ends the presentation tonight. So the enterprise funds, again, we looked at electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste.
So Alan, solid waste, we hired 2 new people. Did we need any vehicles, or we already had the vehicles?
I think we
There's a truck.
programmed.
Yeah, there is a truck in there too.
We saved that for fleet maintenance, for fleet fund, which is
It's in solid waste.
for the breakdown. But 2 trucks?
Just one truck, but solid waste will buy it initially. Any addition to the fleet, that fund buys it. So solid waste does have the budget to buy a truck.
Okay.
And then it'll move over to fleet, and they'll pay the maintenance and lease going on it, but.
Okay.
So we're hiring 2 people, but we're budgeting to collect less trash than we did 2 years ago. Why do we need the people? On your performance measures, you have how much trash you're gonna pick up.
I don't have a good answer for you on that. We'll go back and double check that. There could be some differences. I don't want to take a shot in the dark.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. You can get back to
Your
me.
recycling number is up.
Well, we should
I
get
don't
rid of
know
our
if there's-
recycling program because all of our trash is recycled because it goes to the incinerator, and we're just wasting tons of money with a fake recycling program, which is probably actually worse for the environment because we're running a truck that's not full down the road, creating all sorts of emissions when we could just take it all to the incinerator at once. And we'd actually save quite a couple $100,000 a year, I believe, if we got rid of the recycling program. So,
Are you saying everything goes to the incinerator
yes.
right now?
Except for the recycling, which goes to a different recycling.
Okay, I was thinking I put my stuff in recycle bin, they still take it to the.
No, they take it to a
incinerator.
different recycling place.
Okay.
But you're saying we don't need it. One trip instead of 2.
That is what I'm saying.
How much does recycling cost us?
What is the recycling program number? Commissioner
you-
Roebuck's number globally is not off. I don't know if we lose 200,000 on recycling, but
You can bring it.
recycling is a loss leader. We would still get credit if we took everything to the incinerator. He's correct. The equation there that's missing is just globally recycling is a feel good, do good requirement to go green. You could probably stop it, save money, but politically it would look terrible. If tonight is a message to staff to seriously consider stopping the recycling program, honestly, I would take that seriously. The problem that you have is would have a community in the United States who's thumbing their nose at recycling when everybody's trying to do more and we're going to do less. And everything that was said, I won't disagree with.
I think if you're going to seriously consider it, you have to do the evaluation, which is what I think is just crazy. We've never done it because we do send a truck, a separate truck. We run extra trucks that we wouldn't run that are putting out emissions that would go away. So there's an offset, and that's an evaluation that could be done to see like what is the difference here. But we have no idea. But you know, I agree you would get pushback because, but you know, if the idea is that your recycling program actually creates more problems than it solves, then I think it's worth having the discussion at least.
Where does our recycle go to?
Covanta. Covanta has two programs. Everything goes to Covanta. Everything gets burned. So Covanta, here's Covanta's program. Covanta burns solid waste. That heat turns a turbine and they generate electricity, and they are a micro power plant, and then they sell the electricity from the incineration of solid waste on the market. Once upon a time, I don't know if they still do it, Winter Park bought a couple of megawatts from Covanta. I don't know if they still do. And I don't know who their electric customers are who buy their energy, but they're selling it. Then the other side is their recycling program. So they have the burn pile and they have the recycling program, and then they deal with where they sell our recycling goods at.
Any other questions, comments? All right, Mr. Manning.
I think we covered a lot of ground tonight, so we got some direction. Mr. Mayor, I would turn it back to you and rest until Monday. We have our regular meeting, and Tuesday we have we'll finish everything up with anticipating a real healthy discussion for you on healthcare, gas, fleet.
All right. Any other questions, comments tonight? All right. See you guys Monday night. Everybody be safe. Have a great weekend.